Hello and welcome again to AirgunWeb.com, your home for honest, real-world airgun reviews where we bring you the facts, not fluff. This is episode 3 of our new series called Take Aim, which stands for Airgun Information and Maintenance. We're working our way through some of the basic questions that people ask about airguns. Today we're going to look at airgun scopes. We'll be looking at traditional scopes today, but we may get around to red dot and reflex style sighting devices at a later date. Before we get started today, I'd like to take a moment and thank Leapers and UTG for providing virtually all the products in today's episode. I also want to take a moment and thank Pyramid Air for sponsoring this series. Many, if not all, of the products you'll see today are available on their website, www.pyramidair.com. So let's go ahead and get started. Today's episode is entitled The Scoop on Scopes. We're going to start by looking at the components of a scope. Scopes come in all shapes and sizes, but most have the same basic components. The first part we'll talk about is called the eyepiece. This is the part you look through at the rear of the scope. Most eyepieces are adjustable for the shooter's eyesight limitations. The second part we'll talk about is the magnification adjustment. Not all scopes will have this, just those that are variable power scopes. It will increase or decrease the level of magnification that you see through the eyepiece. The third part is called the tube. This is the part that transfers light from the front of the scope back to the eyepiece. The most common tube sizes are 1 inch and 30 millimeter. The larger 30 millimeter tube allows more light through, which generally means a clearer sight picture. The next part is called adjustment turrets. The turrets are knobs that move the internal components to zero, that is, center of the scope for your particular rifle. Some scopes have locking turrets to prevent accidental changes while bumping around in the field. The next part is called the objective. This is the very front of the scope that sees the target. These come in various sizes from 15 millimeter all the way up to 50 millimeter and larger. A larger objective allows for more light and a brighter sight picture. Some also have an adjustable objective, which adjusts the parallax setting of the scope. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's talk about some definitions. There are some important terms that you need to know when looking at scopes. These are just a few of them. The first is eye relief. This is the comfortable distance that your eye can be from the eyepiece, right here at the rear of the scope. Some specialty scopes have a long eye relief, which is better for some rifles. Today we'll be working with standard eye relief scopes. The second term we'll look at today is called reticle. Commonly called the crosshairs, they can be of various shapes and sizes. The more expensive scopes use etched glass for the reticle. The most common styles are duplex and mil dot. Here's what each looks like through the scope, as it will be easier to show you while telling you, rather than just trying to describe it. Let's start with the duplex. A duplex reticle is made up of plain lines with thinner lines in the center that change to wider lines near the edge of the scope. Generally, duplex reticles are fine for fixed distance shooting, but they will limit you if you shoot at various distances. This is where the mil dot reticle really comes into play. A mil dot reticle has dots or hash marks on the lines at specific points. These allow you to adjust for distance. Because you have this built-in frame of reference, you don't have to re-zero your scope or use the hold over and hope method. You can zero at, say, 25 yards and then with practice, adjust for shots that are closer or further by using the mil dots on the reticle. A mil dot reticle is a must-have for most airguns. Some reticles have an illumination feature which really helps in low light situations. Our third term today is variable power. We talked just a little bit about this before. A variable powered scope will have an adjustable magnification. This is very useful and gives you great flexibility with your shooting situation. A lower power setting will give you a wider field of view, while a higher power setting will zoom in, maximizing the detail on your intended target. Common variations are 3 to 9, 3 to 12, 4 to 16, 6 to 24, and even 8 to 32. Generally, lower magnifications are much better for hunting moving targets, while higher magnifications are better for long-range stationary shooting or very, very precise target shooting. Our next term is parallax. This is actually a complicated topic, better left to engineers or at least college graduates. But here's how I would describe it. Scopes either have a fixed parallax or an adjustable parallax. A fixed parallax scope will be set to a specific yardage. For example, this scope right here is set to a 35-yard parallax. What this means is that at 35 yards and beyond, you will have a clear sight picture of both the reticle and the target. But as you move closer inside 35 yards, the target or the reticle will be out of focus. The closer you get, the more out of focus things become. Also, a variable power scope may amplify the problem. A 3 to 9 fixed 35-yard parallax scope may be okay to use at 10 yards on the 3 power setting. But as you increase the magnification, the sight picture becomes so blurry that you just can't see the target. Most airgun scopes, most decent ones anyway, have an adjustable parallax. This allows you to adjust the parallax setting of the scope to the range of your target, allowing for the full use of the magnification while maintaining a clear picture of both the reticle and the target. Let's move on to the adjustable objective. The most common way of adjusting the parallax on a scope is by using an adjustable objective. As you look at this scope, you're going to see that there's a ring up front with yardages marked on it. When you turn this ring, it adjusts the parallax to that yardage. Now these are relative numbers, so you may need to increase or decrease the setting depending on this particular scope. The last term for today is called SWAT. This stands for Side Wheel Adjustable Turret. This is an alternate method of adjusting the parallax of a scope. It's usually found on higher-end 30mm scopes like this one right here. It allows the shooter to turn this knob with their free hand and adjust the scope while maintaining a sight picture. That gives us a brief overview and introduction to some of the various parts and features found on many airgun scopes. Now, how do you know which is the right scope for your airgun? Generally, airgun scopes range between $40 and $200. Of course, there's going to be some that are a little bit less and a little bit more, but I'm talking generally here. Before you start looking at features, go ahead and set a budget, then start comparing scopes that actually fit in your budget. Here are some helpful tips. Number 1, airgun scopes always benefit from an adjustable parallax. So forget about fixed parallax scopes if you're putting this on an airgun. Your budget will determine if you go with an adjustable objective style or the more expensive SWAT style. Number 2, airguns usually benefit from a mil-dot reticle, especially if you're hunting at various ranges. I suggest only considering scopes with mil-dot reticles. Now that we know that we want an adjustable objective and a mil-dot reticle, these next options will decide which scope is going to be the right scope for you. First, variable power. I prefer a variable powered scope. That gives me a good match of both close-in hunting and long-range precision. 2, illuminated reticle. Honestly, I've never really needed it because I shoot in bright sunlight nearly all the time. But I have tested it in low light, and it's a real lifesaver when you need to hit a dark object. Most mid-range or greater scopes from Leapers actually come with it by default. 3, the size of your objective. As mentioned before, a larger objective allows more light into the scope. Most low-end scopes start with a 32mm objective, but a better starting point is a 40mm objective. The size of the objective will determine how tall your scope mounts also need to be. Number 4, tube diameter. A 30mm tube will give you better light transfer, producing a much brighter picture in lower light, but will almost certainly raise the price of your scope. You usually find the SWAT style adjustable parallax on these more expensive scopes. For my money, I usually pick one of two scopes. On the lower end, I pick the Leapers 3 to 9x40 AO MD IR scope, which sells for about $70. You all hear me refer to AOMDIR quite often. Now you know that it stands for Adjustable Objective, Mil Dot, and Illuminated Reticle. On the higher end of the spectrum, I really like the Leaper's 30mm tube 3-12 by 44 MDIR SWAT scope. It sells for about $110 and is a really nice option for just about any airgun. Last but not least, you'll need to be able to mount your new scope to your airgun. You usually have two options for the base, 11mm or Weaver style. The two options for the top are usually 1-inch or 30mm. Leapers has mounts of all shapes and sizes for your airgun. Also, some airguns, usually the more expensive PCP airguns, require two-piece mounts versus a one-piece mount. Be sure to properly match your new scope with the right set of mounts for your airgun. Well, that's it for this episode of Take Aim. I want to take a moment and thank the folks at Leapers for sending us all these great scopes and mounts. You can be sure that we'll put them to good use around here. I also want to again thank Pyramid Air for sponsoring this series. All of these products that you've seen here today can be researched and purchased right over at www.pyramidair.com. If you have any questions, just click on the live chat button or pick up the phone and give them a call. They'll be very happy to help. Until next time, this is Rick Utzler with airgunweb.com. Thanks again for watching.